Alright, this is how to gild on paper with Speedball Mona Lisa metal leaf. This is not actual gold leaf, it is the metal composite leaf. The first thing you want to do is take an old paintbrush and lay down a little bit of acrylic paint. This is your moisture barrier. Not only does it provide a sealer for your paper, because the adhesive is a little bit greasy and will cause a grease stain on your paper, but it also gives you a red base for your metal leaf, which helps it look nice. Make a good coat on everywhere that you would like to gild. Try not to go over the lines. And any texture that happens during this stage is going to show up later on in your gilding. So make sure that if you're flat gilding, you create a very nice flat surface without too many brush strokes. And if you're doing a raised gilding, you need to take your time and build up those layers very slowly. This first section will be flat gilding, and since everything has to be painted with the base coat, I'm just going to paint all of it all at once, and then we'll come back in another video and do the raised gilding, and hopefully I will be able to figure out how to fast forward these things. Rinse off in water. Never leave acrylic paint on your brushes. Always put your cap back on so that your paint doesn't dry out. Next up, because this paint should be dry, we are going to put the adhesive on. This is for a flat gild. And the Mona Lisa kit comes with this little I think it's a 2.4 ounce container, and I did purchase a larger container, but I've been gilding for several months and I have not gone through this. It's quite the bang for your buck. Also did actually buy real metal or real gold leaf. It is tremendously expensive. You don't want to water this adhesive down too much, and you want to provide a liberal coat. See, I'm sort of flooding that area. That went quite nicely. I think I'll do a couple more. Actually, I want to move this in here so you can see what I'm doing. Dip the brush in so it loads up. Can you see that? Is that focusing on that? There we go. And for SCA Scroll, Society of Creative Anachronism, I usually use hot press paper. This is a cold press, and it's actually my practice paper for all my calligraphy. See that little bubble in there? You don't want that. That is not a nice little bubble, and I will talk about how to get rid of that in a moment. Oh, there it goes. If it hadn't gone away on its own, I would have popped it with a little pin, because that will actually show in your final gilding. Alright, so I'm only going to do the first three because these are flat gilded, and I've distributed that pretty evenly. Always, always, always wash your brush. Put the cap back on. And at this point we have to wait 20 minutes. Usually it's not that long. That's what the directions say is 20 minutes. I've found that if it's a cold day and the heat is on, it can be as little as 5 minutes. You just have to babysit it. Do not set the timer and go off and do something for 20 minutes and then come back on a dry day and expect it to still be tacky. So we will come back shortly and I will show you how to gild with the leaf. Okay, what I'm going to do now is, while we're waiting for the adhesive to dry on the top three, is I'm going to put some gesso on the bottom three to do a raised gilding. And that way I can probably show you the gilding all at once, because they take about the same amount of time to dry. So some people like to tint their gesso a little bit with watercolor or acrylic. This is acrylic gesso. It does not work as well as slacked plaster does, which is awesome, but I am poor and I have a gallon of this. On the downside, it does take a long time to build up the layers, but you're going to find that it takes a long time to build up the layers in any gesso. And again, pay attention to your brush strokes, because they will come through. You can actually sand gesso very lightly, extremely lightly. Careful, delicate, to make the brush strokes not quite so apparent. And when you get something little like this, you don't want to pile in your gesso too much, but you can actually do something little like this, just like that. And before this is totally dry, because it's acrylic, it dries very quickly. You can just come back in and do another layer. And basically, with a raised gilding, you're building up these layers underneath, and it just helps that gold reflect the light in a more three-dimensional way. And with the acrylic gesso, you don't have to worry so much about, you should stay in the lines just because it's good form to stay in the lines, but it's not going to bleed on your paper if you don't stay in the lines. It's really not that big of a problem. I'm not entirely certain what happens with the slacked plaster. I haven't used it enough to know. That one got a little wonky there. At this point, I need to wait for those to dry. I can do another layer on them, and we'll come back when that happens. Okay, things have tacked up a little bit. I had a bit of a mishap. I touched it too soon, and it came off. If that happens, you can either wait for it to tack up and rub it off all the way and then put the adhesive back on, or you can just try to fill in that little hole, which is what I did for demo purposes. If you wanted something really smooth, you wouldn't fill in the hole, you'd just take the adhesive off and redo it. But hear that and see that? That's when you know it's tacky and it's going to hold the gold leaf. Now you have several different types of gold leaf available. You have gold flake. See this? This is actually what comes off of the gold leaf. You save those. This is a loose gold leaf. You can see, hopefully, that it's just sort of that. Alright. And then there's also what's called simple leaf, and it's exactly like your other leaf, except it's stuckied to another piece of paper. It's handy in some ways because you can cut the piece of paper like this. See, there's just a little strip. You can cut it with scissors much easier, and it doesn't fall off. In other ways, it's kind of a pain in the butt, and it is a couple dollars more. I like the regular loose leaf, but I have this wonderful little strip already cut of the simple leaf with a nice little handle there. And so that's what I'm going to use to show you how to do this. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the leaf and set it, I'm trying to do this over the top of the camera, and set it right there and kind of gently press, just tap tap. Now with the simple leaf, you don't want to pull it off this way because then you're going to lose this entire strip. What you want to do is come back here and kind of tug a little, and that broke that leaf off, and you still have some overlap, which is good. And we're going to press, press, press. And I don't know if you can see how that, do you see that, what that's doing? It broke away almost in that exact shape. Now this one's going to be a little bit trickier because it's bigger than the strip of paper, which is fine. Press, press, trying not to touch that. Now when you're rubbing with your fingers like that, you're actually burnishing it a little bit, and see, it all came away pretty much. What you can do with the composite leaf, you don't have to worry about your fingers touching it so much. It's not like the genuine gold leaf where it can be a problem, where you're gilding your fingers rather than the thing you want to gild. Then you're going to take a soft, flat paintbrush, and this should be reserved for this purpose. You don't want to double duty your paintbrushes. And we can just kind of pull this up and sticky it down over here. When you have it wrinkled like that with the not gold leaf, with the composite metal, it's a copper zinc alloy, you will find that it does not burnish down as well as the genuine gold does. For the price difference, I really don't care. This is, you know, $10 and $13 versus $80 and $100. Okay? Now the next thing we can do is take a piece of tracing paper, and a lot of the gilders like what's called glassine, which is actually really hard to find. So we're just going to take the tracing paper and rubby, 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 rub. This is just a finger burnishing technique. Okay? And I did not put any adhesive over that acrylic gesso. I did, while I was not filming, put a little bit more gesso on. Oh, see, look at that. I didn't wait for my gesso to dry. See, it came off on that. I put some watered gesso on to smooth that out, which I will have to do again because I didn't wait for it to dry. Okay, so we're coming back with this one after we've burnished that down by hand, and very gently oop, no, that wasn't dry enough. At this point, you could wait for everything to dry. See, that was where my center was. And it will dry. There's no worries on that. So I think I'm going to avoid my center here and just hit my outside edges. Sometimes you have to redo an area with the adhesive. It's not that big of a deal. Yep, see, that came up because that wasn't dry. Impatience. You have to be very patient with it and pay attention to it, because if it gets too dry, it's not that big of a deal. But if it's still too wet and you're rushing it, like I was rushing it, it's not so good. Okay, so there's that. And then you don't throw that leaf away. You want to save it. And it goes right into this little jar. I'm actually going to put what's left on the simple leaf into there because it's not going to do me any good where it is. And usually all I do, see this or not, probably not. I'm going to tip the paper up. You don't want to bend your paper too much. But what goes in, goes in. Sometimes I'll put a piece of tracing paper underneath that and use that as a funnel. But most of it goes in. Okay. And then we'll get our paper back down where you can see it. Right there. My son would say, pretty good. Okay, so we'll come back a little bit later. I'll re-burnish that. I want to hit this with more adhesive. See, I have some red edges. Maybe if I tip the paper up. Yeah, there we go. You can see where the red is. We want to get that covered. And I also want to redo this particular circle that got mushied around. Alright, we are back. Things are probably dry enough. What I'm going to do tonight, because it is very, very late here, is just pop on some of my loose leaf with my hands. You can do this with a brush. I have not found a brush that works as well as I would like it to do this. So just do it with my fingers. It doesn't really hurt the leaf. Some people have said that your fingers will tarnish this, but we're sealing it anyway, so it doesn't really tarnish. And I do have a test strip that I did a while ago to see if this actually does tarnish, and it does. So when you're using the copper zinc alloy, and see I covered that with multiples, so whatever isn't really touching the adhesive will just come off. It's really not that big of a deal. If you wanted something super smooth, it might be a problem for you, but I don't really bother me. And one more. And I'm going to, in this clip, I'm also going to do one more layer on the gesso. Okay, so I'm just pouncing it down with my thumb. I'm going to put my leaf back where it belongs, hopefully. Always keep your leaf in its packet or in a secure place. Breezes can... This is a lot hardier than real gold. With the genuine gold, the slightest breath will gild the window. This is not like that. It's much more user-friendly, but you still need to keep it in its packet because it will gild the window. Okay, so there's that, and I'm going to open up my gesso one more time, and I'm using a very, very wet brush and just a little bit of gesso so that I have a nice, like almost a slurry. See that? And I'll hit this one more time. The goal is to make the center of this very, very smooth. This one is already pretty smooth. I'm just going to get it again. And that one's pretty good too. And there's that. And we're just going to leave that as it is and let it dry overnight. I can probably come back with my tracing paper and really burnish this down with my fingers. I've also heard of people using a piece of cotton or silk velvet. I've never tried it, and it is on my to-try list. But here is the test strip that I did a few months ago. Maybe you can see it. Oh, I took the camera up and you'll be able to see it. Here's the test strip, and if I turn it, you can see slightly where things have tarnished just a little bit. Not much. There you go. There you can see that. And this was done in the summertime. Actually, I think it was done in June. So it gives you an idea. It does eventually tarnish. Alright, so we'll come back to this tomorrow, and I will show the raised gilding and flake away on the flat gilding and show how to fix that. Alright, it's the next morning, and everything should be pretty dry, so what we're going to do is just make sure that everything is tamped down here, and then gently start to lift off with the brush. And you can just kind of scoot that over. Sometimes I keep the jar open right beside me. You don't have to leave this overnight. I just did that because it was very late. And I also have help this morning who was sleeping last night. I need that, honey. Thank you. And you can just take this. Sometimes you can pick things up with the brush. See, I picked that up with the brush. And then pop it in the jar.
Pop it in the jar.
Mm-hmm.
Pop it in a drawer.
And that way you don't have as much to tamp in.
Help. Help.
Mama doesn't need your help right now.
Oh.
It's nice of you to offer, though. You're a good helper. Then you kind of want to scrub back and forth just a little bit. Very, very soft brush. Don't do this with like a hog bristle brush because you'll scratch the gold. You won't get a nice finish on it. And this composite gold does not give you the super soft, shiny finish that real gold gives you. It's shiny, but all of those little wrinkles and stuff, you really can't burnish them away. And I don't know if it's because the adhesive is soft. I really don't know the reason, but when you try to burnish it, it just sort of crumbles up a little bit. So expect that you're going to have almost a crackle effect. And I'm just going to brush this off to the side for now. Because it's not real gold, you don't have to worry about getting up like every little fleck of gold dust. Again, this is another very soft brush.
I want sweep.
Well, let Mommy sweep her thing, okay? Very soft brush. And I'm just getting up any little crumbly flakes. Coming at it from different directions, that will help a lot.
Help.
Mm-hmm.
I want help.
All right, now.
A ruler.
It is a ruler, yes. Tissue paper again. Lay it down and just hit that one more time with your finger. And that just helps press any fluffies down. And it also will let you know if there's any sticky bits left. The tissue paper will stick if there's sticky parts. Okay, now for this one, it's got pretty smooth and it's not up very far. So I may want to hit that a few more times with the gesso just to make it come up farther. You can also actually use Elmer's glue. And I found that Elmer's glue brings it up off the surface a little bit higher and a little bit better, but you have to go real slow, otherwise you'll get a divot as it dries. So just like with the gesso, you have to paint it on very slow. So I'm going to do a couple more coats of gesso. I'll do one on camera, and then I'll do the rest later after I get it the height I want. Just know that this takes a lot of patience. So raised gilding is a much more time, there's a lot more time that goes into it. Because you're layer, 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 layer. That might be a little bit too much gesso on that. I'll have to be careful, bring that bead around. You'd be amazed how that just flattens right down. You don't want to pile it up too high because you'll get this weird divot in the center. And you can fill those, but they're difficult to fill, especially when you're doing larger areas. These are very small little motifs for the demo. But if you have a big letter, you want to make sure that you're building this in gradual layers. Okay, what I'm going to do right now is put the sealer on. This is the sealer that comes with the little package. I think the package is either $13 or $18. I don't quite remember which. And it's just starter pack. And I mentioned it before, you do actually have to seal. And this is This is like dried sealer. It's fine. As long as there's a hole to get in there, it's okay. Dry brush, so no water on the brush. And it doesn't have to be dry, it can be damp. It's actually better for your brush if it's damp because that keeps the sealer from going up into the ferrule and wrecking your brush. And it just takes a light coat. Go over it carefully, and you're going to want a nice even coat because the more brush strokes you leave, the more painted it looks, and you don't want it to look painted because otherwise you could just use shell gold. Alright, and it does dry nice and clear. Believe it or not, this actually helps even out all of those inconsistencies too. You're still going to have them. This is not that nice, shiny, burnished, natural gold or genuine gold look. This is just, it has its own look to it.
Just cut it's longer.
This does not take very long to dry, but you don't want to touch it while it's drying. I would suggest leaving it for a couple hours overnight would be ideal. Cap back on. And the gesso has had enough time to dry. At this point, it's raised up enough off of the paper that I feel comfortable putting the adhesive on. And when I do the gild this, we'll just have to be careful not to get any of the tracing paper onto that which has the sealer on it. Usually I would seal everything all at once. Okay, so let's do that again. Get most of the water off of your brush. Pull up a bead of the adhesive. We're going to put the adhesive on.
Goodbye.
Put the adhesive on real quick and let that dry. Alright, this is all tacked up. See that? And it's not coming off, which is great. And I'm going to take my leaf, and usually when you do this you want to cover the entire area with a layer of the leaf. That's the best way to do it because that way you don't have as many seams. I'll just tamp that down with my fingers. I could actually gently rip that off. I could probably get a full coverage on both of these with that. Just tamp down with the fingers. Okay. And then I want to bring my tissue paper back over, rub, rub, rub. And it's been long enough that that sealer is pretty dry, but I'm not going to rub over the area with that sealer. Like I said before, I usually seal everything all at once when the entire thing is done. And I can really feel that that area is raised up, which is nice. Now I'm going to start pulling this off gently. Carefully. I'll put this in my jar. I could actually put this flake right here back in the packet, but it's up to you how you want to handle your foil. Well, looks like I didn't get the whole thing covered, which is fine. Sometimes it takes two. Actually, most of the time it takes two. Figure on doing two for full coverage. If you're doing something that's kind of slapdash and you want it to look a little bit more rustic, that's fine. For SCA scrolls, we generally want them to be well polished and finished and look as close to the smooth gilded appearance of the medieval stuff. So I'm going to let that dry for a little bit, and we'll come back again later and do another coat over the top. One thing about the synthetic, not synthetic, composite metal is that it doesn't take the adhesive well the second time, and so oftentimes you can't get a consistent coverage over your area. So what I'm going to do right now while we're still here, and this is a little bit early, normally I would just let this dry, just to show you how it beads. Okay? And I'm going to try and get that whole area covered, and you'll be able to see how that beads right up. Watch, it won't do it. It should start to bead. Yep, there it goes. You can see it start to bead. Hopefully you can see that on the video. Kind of pulls away from where the metal is, and it'll pool in different places. It's fine. It ends up looking okay in the end. Alright, so we'll come back in 20 minutes. A little less than that. It's sort of a damp day, so it's going to take a little bit longer to dry. If it's a really dry day in the Northeast here, we get very, very dry days, especially with wood heat. You can see that's really beating up now. And so it dries a lot faster, so you do have to babysit it. Alright, we'll be back in a bit. Okay, that's tacked up nice now. Hear that? And so now we can take more of our metal foil, and if you lay a big sheet right over the top of everything and then tamp that down, we'll get a nice coverage. And actually right here you can see the rays on that gilding. See that? Smooth it out with the brush, and hopefully we'll get a nice smooth finish. I'm going to give that just a couple minutes. It's more like a couple seconds. I have to let the dog in. Lay our tissue paper over it, give it a good firm press with the fingers. I'm actually not pressing down super hard, it's just hard enough that I can really feel where that raising is. Because what we want to do is seal down those edges.
I need the diaper, Mommy.
Oh dear. Okay, so in this portion what we're going to do is dip pen, and unfortunately I can't get this to where you can see me dip the pen here. But use a dip pen, and I've actually got to move this back so that I can draw on this. You can either clean these edges up with a razor blade, or here's the wonderfulness of this particular medium, you can draw an ink around it. And the thing I like about this particular composite metal is that when you draw around it, it doesn't repel the ink like genuine gold does. You can actually get a really nice line. I like to wait at least 24 to 48 hours before doing this, because that gives all of your adhesive, all of your sealant time to dry. You can actually ink before you gild, and a lot of people do that. That's a very good way of doing that, and then you just do an ink touch-up afterwards. But you can see that that has really changed the look of things. And actually, I'm going to just ink that whole thing right now, just to show you how that looks over here. We're having some adhesion problems there. That's fine. And if I'm really having issues with that, I can just fill that in with ink. Just depends on how you want to work your artwork. Sometimes you don't want to put a big black outline around things, that's fine. Okay, nice little circle there. And here is where we get all of our medieval looks to things. Okay, and you could pencil sketch these things out to start. And that's what most people do. I just use little shapes from the template to begin with. Okay, so now they're becoming something a little bit more. I don't know quite what I want to do with those, but you get the idea. Alright, when you're done with your nibs, rinse them off in water, and then I have really enjoyed the Speedball pen cleaner. This stuff right here, it is awesome. I drop my nibs in there. Unfortunately, I tend to leave them in overnight or for several weeks because I forget. Pull them out with a pair of tweezers. These are my favorite tweezers for pulling them out of here because there's a little ridge on the bottom that tends to hold the nibs and you have a hard time getting them out. And also this is just a little bit too narrow, the cap, to pull them out comfortably. So the tweezers are your friend. And then rinse them off in water again, pat them dry. Some people will dip them in alcohol so they dry super fast and there's no rust. But you don't want to leave your pens in water. Don't leave your brushes in water. Clean everything right away because they're made out of wood. Wood and water swell. You get the idea. Alright, thank you very much for watching.